Should the average person be allowed to run a business? David, today we're going to dissect and decide perhaps whether the average person should be allowed to run a business and what a typical business owner looks like.
Welcome to Everything Business Consulting, a podcast dedicated to business consulting success. It's for those of you who already are a business consultant and you want to improve your skills, are an accountant and want to offer consulting services, or you may be an ex-corporate who wants to get out of the rat race and become a self-employed business consultant. Or you may have owned a business before and you now want to use the skills that you've learned to help others in business. I'm David Thexton.
And I'm Julius Bloom.
Everything Business Consulting is brought to you by ConsultX, a global business consulting company that has everything you require to become a successful business consultant or offer consulting services in your existing professional firm. If you'd like to find out more, visit ConsultX.com. Let's go through the typical anatomy of a business owner based on all our experience, and not just my experience, but hundreds of consultants that we have.
Where do they typically start before they become a business owner? What does this person look like?
Well, he or she looks, they could be professional, they could be earning wages, they could be on a salary, they could be on hourly rate, all sorts of things. But essentially, they are an expert in producing a product or providing a service. And that covers absolutely everything, essentially. And they're all different. And last time I saw a list, there was about 1,900 main products and suppliers and service providers in a total list. So there's lots and lots of them. So anyway, so they're in this wage/salary environment, and they are working for a company, and they get paid a fixed rate as a general rule every week or twice a month or something like that. It's typically fixed. Sure, there's some opportunities for a bit of overtime in a wage situation, but it's typically fixed, and typically they're not happy.
Even if it's fixed, even if it's not fixed, typically it's capped. They're never going to earn massive amounts more than what they currently are if they're in that kind of environment.
That's right, and they're absolutely aware of that. And I said earlier that they're not happy, but they feel kind of stuck. Like they're on a merry-go-round, like they've got a wife, they've got children, they've got a mortgage, they've got car payments and so on, and everything else, but they feel kind of stuck because they're jammed in that situation.
And then what happens when this spark or seed is planted in their head that they decide they want to be a business owner?
Well, they see friends, they see family members, they see acquaintances, they see all sorts of things, and they see people going into business, and they see them with perhaps a nicer house than what they've got, a better car, more holidays, and the kids could maybe go to better schools and things like that. They see all of that and they make a decision that I want that. And they talk to their partner, and they almost mutually agree that they are not happy with the life and lifestyle that they've got now, and they want to move up, and they want to do whatever they have to do to get into a business to be able to equal those people.
So that sounds like what Michael Geber in the E-Myth describes as a flash of inspiration, and he says that most entrepreneurs are merely technicians with an entrepreneurial seizure. So they start out as this technician, or as you said, they provide a product or service, that is their profession, and then they have this flash of inspiration, and then they decide they want to be an entrepreneur and start their own business. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. It is. But the thing is that one of the important things to remember is that it costs around the world, $100, $200 to form a company, and that's easy to do. In New Zealand, you can do it in 20 minutes over the internet. And to get a license to operate a business, you basically only need that $200 because there's no exam and there's no training. to run a business. So although this person, this fictitious person, might be very, very good at what they do, they certainly do not know how to run a business.
So they're not trained, but they really want to do this thing. So at some stage they must get really enthusiastic about it and kind of be blinded by the fact, or not even aware of the fact, that they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly. If you don't know what you don't know, then you're in a bit of trouble, and nobody tells them. Nobody says, not their lawyer, not their accountant or anybody, nobody says, Jim, you need to go and do a pretty thorough business course, and that involves the finances of it. And you need to be really sharp and more educated than what you currently are in going to run a business. Like, you can't be a kitchen manufacturer and then on Monday decide you want to operate a business. Or you can't be working in a kitchen manufacturer business, resign, leave, and then start on Monday operating your own business, because there's many important lessons that you don't know.
How do they go from having this spark of an idea to preparing themselves to become a business owner?
Well, everybody's different, of course, and some of them do a bit of investigation into it. They do, most certainly. They are really enthusiastic. They talk to family members and they get a mixture of negativity and positivity as to whether you should go into business. And they read books and magazines, but not enough. Never enough. I would say, and this is a guess, but less than 1 or 2% of new people going into business do that training that's required to run a business.
That's a very small percentage.
Yeah, it is. It is, and that, I suppose that leads on to the reason why over 5 years 60% go broke, and in the next 5 years up to 10 years another 20% go broke. That's 80% fail in their first 10 years, which leaves 20%.
So we've both met lots of business owners. David, can you share a story about someone or a time where you found someone being highly underprepared?
Most of them, all of them. The one I had in total over 5 years, I had 32 clients, but I had 18 clients that were continuous. And I was astounded, because in the first 5 years of business consulting, I was learning too, but I was astounded at what they didn't know. And I found I had to dumb down all of the conversations with them to that of probably a 12-year-old. And I'm not being critical here in any way. I'm just saying that they are very good at what they do, but they don't know what to do when it comes to running a business, and they need somebody to help them. So that's what I found out there. I could pick out a number of stories and everything, but I remember one discussion with one guy, and I said, how was your gross profit last month? And he said, it was about $100,000. And I said, no, gross profit. He said, about 100,000. I said, no, that's your revenue. Oh, is it? And those sorts of conversations, yeah. And so you've got to, with a lot of them, you've got to actually teach them the basics of accounting and explain to them that just because you had $100,000 flowing through the company doesn't mean you can go and buy a yacht on Saturday, kind of thing. And you get a bit of that going on too.
Yeah, okay. So they make the decision to start a business. They obviously need to decide whether they're going to buy an existing business or whether they're going to start fresh, and all of that kind of stuff. How do they typically put this together?
They typically have the money, or they borrow it from the bank, or they extend their mortgage, or it comes from the family, or there could be perhaps another partner who's involved in the business. All of those areas, or maybe even sometimes a mixture of those areas.
One of my clients, he had what I would consider quite a bizarre situation where he was a technician, he was a mechanic, and he went to the bank to try and get a mortgage. He was a father of 3 and his wife wasn't working. She was in some training or some study, and he asked for a mortgage to buy a house, and they declined him and said, you don't earn enough. And they suggested, I couldn't believe this, they suggested that he should start his own business to earn more, and they ended up introducing him to another person who worked at the bank who had a bit of spare money, and said, this guy over here, he could provide you with a bit of capital and he could be your investor. And when I came along, this investor had poured in hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it was basically a black hole because neither of them knew how to run a business.
That was very bad advice.
It was
very bad advice.
Very bad advice.
And yes, I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, that you can get it from other people, but that's an unusual pathway to putting equity into a business.
It absolutely is. Now, carrying on the path of making this decision and starting a business, so once they've organised some money, they're going to start to organise things like their premises and their product and their service and that kind of thing. But they typically still haven't had any training at this point?
No, there's none. There is none. Unless they go and get it themselves, and that's only 1% to 2%.
Now, this just seems bizarre that they would be able to employ people and run a business that can have a significant effect on other people around them. And whilst there is a little bit of regulation, it's well after the fact, after they have had the ability to wreak some havoc.
Yes, and they do wreak havoc. So that is really important. Like that you failed to mention or forgot to mention that they need to get a lease for premises. It'll be a 5-year lease, probably minimum. They need to put a bond up for those premises, and so on it goes. But they've had no real training, and as I said, the government gave that license to them for a couple of $100, and I don't know why they do that. But you think about it. Think about a car license. What do you have to go through to get a car license? Go up a couple of pegs. What about a light aircraft license?
That's quite a few years of training, I imagine.
It is. What
Hundreds
about
of thousands of dollars, I believe.
Yes, and a helicopter license, or a doctor, or a dentist, lawyer, accountant. All of these things, they all require intensive training and certification. And owning a business doesn't require that at all. And they can do just as much damage to their staff, to their suppliers, to their customers.
Well, their families.
Yes, to their families. Just as much damage, and they don't require anything, and I don't understand it.
No, it's very odd. So there's been still no real training or anything like that. But at this point, the business owners are still fizzing, for want of a better word. They're very excited because they're finally doing it, and they're going out on their own and starting their own business and that kind of thing. So shifting gear, they start to run the business, David.
Yep.
Now, they've got their product and their service. Then what happens?
Well, initially it's kind of a heaven for them, because money does start turning over. It starts coming in. They end up paying bills, obviously, and things go round and round in a circle, and the business is operating. They start hiring staff. They start taking on overheads. They quite often in the early stages discover the power of marketing or advertising, and they start to get a few more customers. But the problem is that nobody is measuring this business. And the business owner, I've met many of them who mistake the revenue coming in to the business as being profits. I have one guy that said to me, I went and met him at home, and on top of his television set, this was back in the days when you had a square television set, not a thin one, back in the days, he had a cube of money. And his wife and kids, he had 9 shoe shops. He just gone around to all the shoe shops and emptied the till, and he brought back this sack of money, and they put it into 20s, 10s, 50s and all that, 1s and 2s, and everything had rubber bands around it. And they put it together, and it was about a cubic foot, basically. Wow. A cube of money. And I'd never seen that much before all in one place. And I said, what's that? Like, I knew what it was. He said, oh, that's my profit. Profit? I said, what do you mean profit? He said, no, that's my profit. I said, no, that's your revenue. And he said, no, it's my profit. No, it's not profit. Where'd it come from? It came from all my shoe stores out of the till. So that's the money you turned over, all revenue. No, it's profit. I said, no, it's not profit. I said, profit is what is left over after you paid all the bills. It's gross profit. And then you got to pay tax on it, and becomes net profit after tax. That's not profit. Oh, I never understood that. I never knew that. And I go, oh my gosh.
And so by this point, he'd been able to build up a business to the point he had 9 stores.
Yes.
and he didn't understand the most simplest concept like that.
No, the money just came in, the money went out. He grabbed what he wanted. By then he'd had a brand new car, he'd had a speedboat, he'd had a jet ski, all of these things, and 2 jet skis actually. And as far as he was concerned, things were going really well.
Okay, so we've got this really weird situation where the businesses they've started, they can actually be turning over a good amount of money. Do they typically have a bit of a plan by this point?
No, the plan is to turn the alarm clock on and get up and go to work and just keep doing what they feel they do best. But nothing's measured, and there's just turnover there, and they mistake turnover for being successful when we know it isn't. When we know it's what is the net profit after tax is how you start to understand whether you're successful or not. They feel very proud in the first 6 or 12 months, but like a rock star, celebrity.
I imagine if you got to the point where you had 9 stores or you had a business that seemed to be doing well, people don't know that you don't understand profit behind it, and they don't even know what the profit is.
Nobody knows.
Typically, if you've got a business, you kind of put on a pedestal.
Yes.
So you get this really good feeling about whatever you've done.
You're on the front page of the local newspaper, outside your shoe shop. They draw you into the radio station to record your own ads. Hi, I'm David. I'm from Johnson Shoes, and that sort of thing. and it's a bit of an ego thing as well. And all of their friends and family and those sorts of people, they perceive success because John's on the radio, always on the front page of the local newspaper, and Mum gets a copy of it. I sound quite cynical. I know. In fact, they used to call me Cynical David. But anyway,
did they actually? They
did, yeah, yeah. Because I always come into clients when I start talking with clients. In my mind, I'm not cynical talking to them, but I'm always know that what their perception of their businesses is not reality.
Yeah. And that will be very different to the outside perception, I imagine, as well.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. So I have a client that I had in Australia that owned a relatively big, it was about $12 million a year, a protein supply company that supplied protein powders and all sorts of concoctions for bodybuilding and things like that, and for athletes and those sorts of people. And he had a business, absolutely no control of it. What was worse was that his accountant, he had a on-staff accountant, and this guy was useless. The first lot of accounts I got the first 2 months of accounts, and I compared them, and nothing made sense. Like the carryover balances of each of the major parts of the business and everything were all incorrect. Gross profit was no good. Stock taking, everything you can think of, without mentioning them all, it was no good. So I had to talk to the owner of the business during our one-on-one sessions. I had to explain to him that the information that he was getting about every quarter or 6 months was wrong, absolutely wrong. And he said, it can't be wrong. I said, well, no, it's wrong. It is absolutely wrong, and we need to do this properly. So anyway, but this guy, George, his name was, he came around to, I had a home office. He came around to my home office one day. I was about 6 months into the relationship, and a brand spanking new red Ferrari, I don't remember the model number, whatever the model number was, about 2007, 2008, brand spanking new, 4 exhaust pipes, sounded like $1 million. But I said, where do you get this from? He says, I bought it. Bought it on a hire purchase. It only cost me $6,000 a month in payments. And I thought, I wouldn't have done that if I owned that company. It was in the shape that it's in. So anyway, just things like that happen. And he lived in a multi-million-dollar house right on the waterfront, and he had a boat and all those sorts of things. But the problem was he got all his money from the business, and the business was losing money at the rate of about $75,000 to $80,000 a month, and he didn't even know this. Initially, I was the only one that knew this, because I was able to piece together all of the bits and pieces of information and collate it together into something that was true.
Why didn't he know?
Because his accountant was useless.
So they weren't measuring it, or they weren't measuring it well?
It was like he wasn't even an accountant. It was like he didn't even have the knowledge behind it to be able to prepare monthly accounts.
And the business owner, he was even less aware of accounts, so he just took it as the truth.
He just saw $1 million a month coming through the till.
And that would have been more than what he'd ever seen before.
Oh yes, of course, yeah, and that's what happens. And then it won't hurt to go and spend $100,000 on a boat and $15,000 each for a couple of jet skis and that sort of thing. And then he figured out, $6,000 a month for a brand new Ferrari is going to pump my ego up, and so on and so on. And those are only the things that I knew about. So yeah, that was an interesting situation. But I had to take control of the finances of the business and get rid of that accountant. And then I put that company into a pet accountant that I had on the Gold Coast.
What's a pet accountant?
Well, a pet accountant is an accountant who you know very well and you can trust as a business consultant to be able to produce true and accurate accounts. Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
You can't measure it, you can't manage it. And as a consultant, that's obviously what you're there to help the business owner do, is help him measure and then manage the business, make good decisions and improve it, right?
That's correct. Imagine having conversations that go something like this, and pretend you're the business owner. How are the sales this month? Oh, pretty good. What was your revenue this month? Oh, it wasn't bad.
What does that mean?
Nothing. What was your gross profit? Are we reaching our gross profit target? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I've got a good feeling about it though.
Yeah, it feels good. Feels good, Julius. And all that sort of stuff. So this is what you come across very, very often.
And when you start to measure it properly, what do you find? Is there a typical thing that you would find when we're looking at the anatomy of a normal business and the business owner?
You find a complete lack of financial control inside the business.
Okay.
Money going everywhere, productivity's not very good. You find that they're losing stock, wastage is too high. There's a list a metre long,
Yep.
all the things that you find when you get in there, but they're all contributing to making the business lose money.
Something we see a lot of when we start working with businesses is hollow turnover. David, what's hollow turnover?
It's where you might turn over $1 million a month, but there's no profit in there. You're just turning the money over for the sake of turning it over, and it doesn't. Like, every dollar that goes through a company should contribute a gross profit, and the expenses should be less than what that gross profit is to give you a net profit before tax. And it comes cascading down. But if you turn over $1 million and it costs $1 million to run the company, then you're in big trouble because you're just going to go backwards.
Now, do you have any examples of businesses you worked with that have had this sort of issue?
Yeah, I had a beverage company in Brisbane, and that was one of the issues they had. They turned over a lot of money. They were $36 million a year. What's that? $3 million a month, isn't it, roughly? And there was never any money. The whole thing was hollow turnover. They've been doing this for years, and I think for 1 or 2 months, which I think from memory was November and December, coming into Christmas, they broke even and made a little profit, and then the rest of the 10 months of the year they just lost.
And so that, for those people around the world, that will be the summer months, coming into the summer months in Australia, so the hot months where the juice products are in high demand.
Yes, correct. But same thing there, they had an accountant who just wasn't able to produce monthly figures or accurate figures. And I'm astounded. Cut a long story short, over the 5 years that I was consulting, I sacked 5 accountants. And the reason why I did was because these were mostly internal accountants, is because they didn't know what they were doing. And you would think that an accountant on the 10th of the month following would be running into the owner of the business's office with a big bell ringing and saying, loss, panic. Because I am sure that if they approach this problem properly, the way we do, that they would do 1 month's trading, 10th of the month, they would know whether they'd made or lost money. By the 20th of the month, they would have had numerous meetings to fix that problem, and they would have implemented strategies to fix it, and then by the 10th of the next month they would, probably only half a month worth of changes, but they should be able to see a change being made, and most certainly
on the road to improvement.
Yes, on the road to improvement, yes. And everybody needs to be focused. So then you start breaking down the tasks. I won't go into detail here, but breaking it down into sales managers' tasks, warehouse managers, factory managers, and that sort of thing, so that everybody knows what part they play along the road to making profits.
So the couple of examples that you've used, David, have been with quite big businesses. Is this a typical story of lack of control and all this money flying around and not knowing what's going on in a small business as well?
Exactly the same. Every business has the same DNA. It has revenue, it has gross profit, it has expenses. And the gross profit's got to be greater than the expenses. If it isn't, you're losing money. Even big companies, I'm thinking back about probably 8 to 10 years now, down here in Australia and New Zealand, we had a very big company called Dick Smith Electronics, and they had hundreds and hundreds of these electronic stores right across Australia and New Zealand. And they had exactly the same issue. Like, they went on and on and on, and they had a board, and they had board meetings, and everything went along, and the figures were going up and down. The board couldn't control what was going on. It was an absolute mess. It went spectacularly bankrupt.
I remember that. There was a little bit of almost fraud in there as well.
There was a bit of that in there that they got out in the end, and some other things came out. Whilst it was in the newspapers and everything, I remember reading a paragraph in there where they bought 11 years worth of batteries.
I remember that,
yeah. 11 years worth of batteries. It should have bought
what's the expiry date? What's the shelf life of a battery?
3 years. Yeah. 3 years. But they should have bought 1 month worth of batteries, basically. 11. So what had happened, the fraud you're referring to was the buyer for Dick Smith basically took a backhander. And that's why they bought so many batteries. And they put them on special and everything, but you can only sell batteries as fast as they're running out. So what happens is they go downhill, they're taking too much salary, they're taking too high a lifestyle, the money is being sucked out, or the equity is being sucked out. They're going downhill. Initially, when they can't pay their bills and everything, they say that they have a cash flow issue. And it's not a cash flow issue, it's a loss of equity issue which is being drained away. Like the family unit needs money whether the business is making a profit or not. There's school uniforms, there's school fees, there's food, there's rent, there's mortgage, etc., etc. All of those things, clothing. So whether it's making a profit or not, the family doesn't care. It needs all of those things. So they're drawing that out of the business. The business isn't making any money. It's going downhill. First signs of that are, as I mentioned, that they announce to perhaps their accountant or somebody that they've got a cash flow problem. A cash flow problem is where your accounts receivable or debtors get so big and they're so far behind in paying you their accounts that all your cash is being tied up in the accounts receivable ledger where they owe you money, so you become a bank to those people, is what you've essentially, a no interest bank to those people. So anyway, so that happens, and then all of a sudden they're trading along and they can't pay their monthly sales tax. In New Zealand, Australia, we call it GST. They can't pay the sales tax, and that's the easiest not to pay, because in Australia and New Zealand, they're not very proficient in collecting that tax, and you can hide away from them for a few months. Then they stop paying creditors, and they start getting put on stock credit from the creditors. And then the last thing that happens, that's the death knell, is that they can't pay the wages, and typically you get about 2 shots. Like for your employees, not paying them wages for 1 week is going to be just dreadful. But if you don't pay it for 2 weeks, then what's going to happen is you're going to have a mass exodus from the company, and you've lost all of your intellectual property that's in their heads, all of their training and things like that. That's the thing that happens, and then the business basically fails. And as we mentioned earlier, it's 60% in 5 years, and 80, another 30, 60, 70, 20% in 10 years.
So, David, have you had any experience with businesses like this that haven't been able to pay wages?
Yeah, I had a few. Yes, yep. And when we analysed it, we found that they were overstaffed, and they had been for a long period of time.
And how did you fix it?
Well, how we fixed it was we sat down with the management team and we did a big organisational chart on the wall with no names on it, no people on it, just positions. It was a little bit of a trick actually, kind of. And we went through, and when we'd finished it all at the end, and when we put names next to these positions, we found there were over-employing 20 people, which had been going on for a long period of time.
That sounds like a fair chunk of excessive wage expense.
$1 million a year, roughly.
Wow.
Yeah, just in that, plus other things, yeah.
Well, that would cause a business to fail if you didn't know about it. So you caught that just in time then?
I did, yes, plus a whole lot of other things we did, yeah.
Okay, and what happened to that business in the end?
Well, very quickly, it put that $1 million on the bottom line, which got it to break even, and then we had to do a lot of intensive work on product costings, raw material suppliers, productivity, and a whole lot of things like that to find another $1 million to put genuine $1 million profit on the bottom line.
And you made that work?
Yes, of course, yes. So what happens, Julius, is we, when I say we, I mean consultants, what we do is we become the person in the business who's in charge of the profit, growth and business value. Now, I've been around corporate and businesses all my working life, and I'd never seen a door that goes John Jones, manager of profit, growth and business value. Never seen that in my life. So nobody does it. The CEO is probably responsible for it, but they don't do it. They're doing other things, and other people are doing other things. And the day that a company has that position in it, where somebody just looks after those three things, then there's going to be a turnaround, providing they know what they're doing, obviously. But yeah, profit, growth and business value is people don't do that. They don't do that. They drift along.
And so that's what our job as consultants would be to do then, is to go and help these business owners that haven't been trained. They haven't done a test, they've got into business, and all of these things start to happen, and they're kind of, I guess they're only guided by the way that the wind blows and that kind of stuff, and they don't know what's going on, and then we go in there and we sort them out.
Yeah, we use a little story in that it's like a cork on the ocean being blown around by the wind and moved around by the tides. They just end up anywhere. They have no direction. They have no anything. So a lot of these businesses, I say most, which is over 75%, are in that position.
And the picture we've just painted of the anatomy of the business owner, someone who's good at what they do and they want to become a business owner and they get really enthusiastic about it, and then they start and they kind of might start to realise they don't know what's going on and they're out of control, and all of these pressures kind of build up. Is that 75% of business owners as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a little bit more now with this virus issue in the last 12 months. Like it was 75% a year ago, it's probably 85 now.
Well, and do any business owners manage to turn a profit and do well despite these issues?
No, because they can't turn a... Oh, yeah, sorry, I see what you're saying. Turn a profit and do well. Yes, accidentally.
Accidentally.
That
doesn't sound like a good plan to succeed if you're doing it by accident.
Well, it's not a good plan. But by accident, I mean, let's say they move into a product or service that's new in an area or in a marketplace or in a country, and they're sort of the first people, early starters, something like that. And that's about the only time they fluke it. Like I've had a couple of client business owners that have fluked it. Fluke means luck, in Australasian. They fluke it. And it's just luck, and I work with these people, and I go, oh my God, how did this person get here? Get to have such a successful business when he doesn't know anything? Well, that's just luck. It's just good fortune. But there's not many. There's only 10 to 15% of business owners that are doing that.
Okay, well, then we're left with this burning question, David. If we know that 60% of businesses fail within 5 years and 80% fail within 10, we know that business owners, the average person, isn't really equipped to run a business. Should the average person be allowed to run a business? Now, to our listeners, we'd love to know your thoughts and perhaps some ideas you might have around this. So please put this in the comments on YouTube or reach out to us on social media on all the major platforms, including Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Everything Business Consulting is brought to you by ConsultX. It's a global business consulting company that has everything that you require to become a successful business consultant or to offer consulting services in your existing professional firm. If you'd like to find out more, come visit us at consultx.com.